Welcome to the MBD podcast, the show where we dig into what's actually working or not when it comes to scaling businesses with the people who've been there. Today's guest has definitely been there. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell them where you've been, what you're doing a little bit.
Jason, thanks for having me. My name is Blake Gibbons. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the tech space for about the last 7 or 8 years. Prior to that, I was in the medical device industry, working for a large firm called Stryker. And I've been in sales and leadership roles for the better part of my career, but mostly have been working in SaaS and then obviously more recently in AI ventures. And so initially joined my current position with RunDiffusion as their chief revenue officer. I joined them as an advisor, having started a few companies in the past, and it was really joined them to help them really scale up their enterprise go-to-market. They had been mainly focused on product-led growth prior to me helping them and joining the company, and then ended up joining the company full-time about 8 months after advising them. So it's kind of what I'm doing
Awesome.
today.
So is because right along the line, so if you're going into a company, say like them, and they're trying to scale and they're having struggles, how kind of do you go about that to help them get through those failures so that way they can get to the next level?
Yeah, I think, initially when I joined RunDiffusion, all three of the founders were technical. And so didn't really have a lot of go-to-market, demand generation skill sets, if you will. And so they were doing a pretty good job. Actually, I was really impressed from a product-led growth perspective. The company was actually growing quite well. That was one of the reasons I joined. I was like, hey, if we can layer on all the expertise that I have from a go-to-market, from sales operations, revenue operations standpoint. If we're doing this well, just with product-led growth, and they don't really know exactly what they're doing from a sales-driven approach perspective just yet, we could really make this thing fly. And so a lot of it was just bringing in processes to the company that were scalable and repeatable. And initially, when you kind of build those things out, you're doing them manually. And then once they start to actually gain some traction, then you look for ways to operationalize those things so you can rinse and repeat and set them a little bit on autopilot. So my advice always to companies is you're not always in a position when you start out to kind of scale everything. And it's actually not a good idea to do that because that takes more time and investment. You should really build out some processes sort of manually at first. And then once you kind of understand what your go-to-market approach is, what your sales strategy is, what your customer success process looks like for land and expansion within accounts. Once you really kind of do those things a little bit manually at first, you know how to kind of perfect those and rinse and repeat to actually start to operationalize them so they're systematized a bit. So
And so, what is an example of something that of a process you put in place essentially for, let's say, the sales or marketing when you come in, just to kind of get it off the ground? Like, how do you do kind of a rough directive for them?
early on within the company, we didn't even really have like a CRM. So for all of our customer data, everything was coming in through our back-end data infrastructure, so Firebase with Google.
Hmm.
And none of that information was really stored in sort of a central customer relationship management
Wow.
system because before I came, they didn't really need it. So, even as things as simple as at the size of the company we were at when I first joined, it wasn't like we were going to make thousands and thousands of dollars worth of investment into Salesforce or like a HubSpot or something like that. That had its time later on. We're on HubSpot currently. But initially, I just got a poor man's CRM and basically combined a sales enablement platform with a CRM. And so I used Apollo. I think it's one of the
Hmm.
cheapest systems out there to give you kind of a lot of depth of functionality with sequencing for cold outreach, in addition to people database, in addition to some CRM and like pipelining functionality. So that's kind of what we started out with and sort of systematized some of those things and just standing that up and building out that CRM. And then eventually kind of gravitating more now to where a lot of those things we've kind of outgrown, the initial startup phase to
Hmm.
where there's AI tools now that you should, as a company, really be focusing on AI first approaches across your entire organization, from engineering to customer success to sales and revenue operations. So now I use Clay a lot as an orchestration tool that, for example, we have website visitors to come to our site, and then I use Octave to really write up all of our playbooks and sort of our customer ICP profiles using LLMs. All that information gets dropped into Clay for contextual data. And then when leads come in through our website, um, all that contextual data gets put into very, very hyper personalized outreach. And then that all gets piped into Smart Lead for outreach at scale. And then we, of course, have retargeting that happens when those people go to our website and our landing pages. And that's all very, very systematized. And it's all very AI driven. And so that's kind of where we are now versus where we were when I first joined, of
Yeah.
just standing up like a poor man's CRM.
Yeah, and I've done poor man CRMs with companies where it's a Google sheet. um,
Airtable. Yeah, my first
yeah,
venture, we got to $1 million in ARR with an Airtable database and
I
CRM.
believe it.
So
Yeah,
that's for sure possible.
yeah, it's doable. It's interesting. So, are you mapping the customer site experience to the form field, and then providing AI, and then leveraging AI to provide context about how they navigated the site for when you do the outreach? Is that what I
We're
was hearing?
not doing that as well as I'd like to, but that's the direction we're moving in, right? Because everything now in marketing and especially cold outreach, I mean, your cold outreach and your marketing qualified leads or your push-pull marketing should really work together as
Hmm.
a flywheel together.
Yeah.
And everything should be intent-based now because, outreach and sales loft and some of those other tools, they were really, really powerful, but they also just saturated the market with a bunch of spam. And now to be really stand out, even now, like everybody has access to AI tools, but I don't think a lot of people are using them very effectively. Really, it's intent-based demand generation. So you should be reaching out to people at the right time when they're thinking about your product. So there's all sorts of signals that you can kind of capture, and then using LLMs to contextualize your outreach based on
Hmm.
interactions that they've had maybe with your website or your ads. That's the best way to go if you can de-anonymize and have that data. It's hard to do. It's really hard to set up, but once you get it set
Yeah.
up, it's very effective.
You said something where you're saying that reaching out to people when they're ready. How do you what's your structure to figure that out? How do you know when they're ready for you to reach out to them?
Well, part of that is intent-based signals. So a good example of this would be like building a clay agent out to listen for conversations that are happening on Reddit or LinkedIn around
Yeah.
AI or your product, whatever you might have. You shouldn't really automate that. In fact, if you try to automate that end to end, LinkedIn or like Reddit will block you because they don't
Yeah.
like bot interactions.
Yeah.
But you can get notified of um, intent or signal-based intent-based conversations that are having, or just the context of conversations that are having that are relevant to the services or the products that you're trying to sell. And so if you have a Clay agent set up in that way, Jason, then you could set it up to where maybe that's sending you some kind of a notification in Slack, and it might even take the context of the conversation that's going on and give you a pre-built response that you can kind of adjust. But you're inserting yourself into a conversation at the right time. That's kind of an example of that where
Got it.
it's on people's minds, they're having conversations about it. That works remarkably well.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to go around. And one of the things I think it points to that people don't always associate with is community building, right? So you're on these social platforms, you're on Reddit, maybe Medium. You have these, I call them listening agents, right? They're going through trying to find things relative to what you're telling it to find. It brings that in real time. It could say, "Hey, ping, get in this conversation that's going on," and you can get in there and start providing feedback with those pre done responses. Um, just like you're saying, like I don't think people realize how effective that is and how easy it is to set that up so you can be, so you're not sitting there every day scrolling and refreshing. You're getting notified right away and you can get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. The smartest reps that have been doing this for a long, long time. It's just
Yeah.
been more manual, and now that things are
Yeah.
a little bit more agentic with AI tools that are available to us, you can do this more at scale. But I think still you need to have a human touch, a human approach. Um, I mean, obviously the best time to interact with somebody that might be a potential buyer is when they're thinking or having a discussion about a problem that they're having that is hyper relevant to the service of the product that you're offering. Um, the chances of getting to a demo are significantly higher in that regard, and that's just super obvious versus just a cold outreach email.
Yeah. Completely agree. And with cold outreach emails, we've been finding success where essentially we're doing something similar where we scrape their information and then we find what they're discussing, what the companies are with, and it provides in the email context about more relative to what they're kind of doing and how that solution would fit, right? So if they're this particular company, they
100%.
have right? Like, because you can use Avify, scrape posts. We use N8N a lot. It'll scrape the post, see what they're talking about, create information. So that way, then I just plug that into instantly that's going out in cold. And then it's, within, I don't know, 10 minutes, right? Like it's, once you push the button, it's run the process. And now I got emails going out based on when they're most likely to open it. That's relative to what they're talking about. So it's like, it's so much more personalized, but I don't see it being done that much yet.
No, there's a new position that's kind of bubbling up in the go-to-market and sort of sales field of really a go-to-market engineer, and it's somebody that is, has a go-to-market or a sales hat on, but they're actually a lot more technical, not necessarily a software engineer per se, but understands how webhooks work, understands how API keys and integrations work between a lot of these products, because Clay or even N8N, as you know, those are really, really powerful tools, but they do take some technical
There's a learning curve.
understanding and a learning curve to get really facile with them to be effective. There's a lot of value actually in companies. Companies are starting to look for. I've seen a bunch of positions specifically around like a go-to-market engineer, which is sort of a counterpart to a sales team of doing
Mm-hmm.
sort of all the technical things to kind of stand that up. Because yeah, it isn't. Those systems are so modular that you can kind of massage them however you want, but you really need to understand um, to get what you're looking for out of them takes a little bit of finesse,
It
for sure.
does. Prompt engineering is a big thing right now, still, where
Yes.
you
And
even
we're
have
early
prompts
in
to
this.
write prompts.
Yeah. I mean, in the innovation curve of AI, it's the biggest advancement to hit the world since the dawn of the internet and sort of like personal computing, right? A lot of people
Yeah.
have said, but we're so early in the innovation curve of AI still that even we're in the early adopter phase. So you and I, if you're familiar with OpenAI and ChatGPT, if you were to go ask 500 people in the 100-mile radius around my house, I would venture to say that probably 80% of people have never even used ChatGPT. They've never used Anthropic or anything like that. And that just kind of goes to show you like those things will happen over time, especially as the big adopters like Google natively integrate
Yeah.
Gemini functions into like Android and email. But we're still super early. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it's a learned skill set for sure.
Yeah. So, okay. So we got good. You're identifying these areas of opportunities that you create a manual process around to start, whether that be the CRM or whatever function is. You've got this. Now, how do you know when you're ready to move into a more automated phase of that?
I think, I mean, it generally happens. There's a pretty obvious point where you just don't have the bandwidth to be able
Yeah.
to do everything in a manual way anymore. And then it just makes sense too, where you're like, hey, this is tried true and it's perfect. It actually works pretty well. This is a good experience for the customer. We're starting to close deals in this way, and so I don't need to manually do it anymore because this is data. I mean, it's really what the data says, right? Um, that's one of the things that companies don't do super well, even us. Like we haven't really cleaned our data house super well. We have some information living in Metabase. We have some information living in Apollo still, some information in HubSpot. We're trying to get that better, but the better you can organize your data even early on to really understand what's happening at a macro level, data really informs your strategy. And and so that's what I would say is you just follow the data. Like if you have a manual process that starts to work and you're doing it over and over and over again, the data is saying that you should really automate this. Um, there comes a point where it just becomes obvious where it's like, why am I
Hmm.
doing this over and over and over again in a manual way? Like I've kind of figured out this. I've kind of figured out this mousetrap, and now I just need to basically build a factory that makes hundreds of these every time.
Right.
It works.
Yeah. Like invoicing. Some people like to invoice.
I know. Yeah, I mean, if you want to do things manually and you just really love to be able to write that step up, all power to you. But there comes a point, right, where it doesn't make sense for the value of your time. Like once you've kind of stood those things up. I'll also say that you know, in an earlier stage venture, obviously we wear a lot of different hats, and so not everything has to be perfect. Perfect is often like, I mean, people often say like good is the enemy of perfect and things like that. But if you try to be a perfectionist early on, you're going to waste a lot of time because things are going to change and evolve over time. And I would say get most processes to where they're like 78% of the way there and then kind of move on. So I built out our customer success process. Am I a customer success leader first? No, I'm a revenue or a sales leader. But do I have a process that works pretty well that's automated that I could hand off to our CS leader when I hire that person? And will they make it, turn it into pure gold that I've created that's got some gold specs in it? Yes. Does it work for right now? For sure. And so that's the other bit of advice I would give people is early on, just
Progress, yeah.
don't
Progress
try to
over
make everything
perfection.
perfect.
Yeah.
100%.
I've always said that progress over perfection. Like you go
And
nowhere if nothing's done.
you can get really bogged down in
Hmm.
decision fatigue with like there's a myriad of decisions you have to make, and so sometimes you just have to, it's good enough and move on.
Yeah, sure. Now, great. So you got that going on. You're identifying processes. They're getting in place now. Currently, how are you guys scaling where you're at? Where are you guys seeing success, and what did you have to work through, kind of to get over some humps?
Where we're seeing success now is really I've kind of been trying to brute force my way with the company to, I'm very much focused on the sales-led growth, enterprise growth
Hmm.
side of the fence. The revenue is stickier, the LTVs, the ACVs are larger, enterprise value is better with larger customers as well versus more product-led growth, smaller consumer type plans or even just individual plans. And so I've really wanted to like steer our ship in that direction from a brand tone, a messaging, and even a go-to-market strategy perspective. And so we're starting to see a lot of scale and a lot of growth really in that direction. A lot of those efforts that I've kind of invested early on, a couple of, in the last 18 to 24 months, are really starting to bear fruit now, where
Hmm.
now enterprise is about 65% of our revenue overall versus product-led growth. And so it's a much healthier place to be with regard to enterprise valuation,
Yeah.
churn being lower, larger, again, just larger customers. You have to be kind of careful there too, in that sometimes early on, if you land a really large enterprise customer, there's a lot of risk there too, because they might be a massive amount of your business and you would really kind of want to diversify. But I would say and land more accounts. But I would say we're having a lot of success right now is closing larger business contracts is starting to really work well for us.
What techniques are you using to identify these enterprise clients and get in front of them?
What's cool is the way that product-led growth actually supports enterprise growth in a lot of ways. So if you look at the way Figma grew, I mean, a lot of it was product-led growth initially, where they had somebody from Nike or somebody from Adidas come in, use their platform for design, and be like, "Wow, this is cool," or a student at a university, and then enough of them start using it, there's sort of this groundswell of interest that then eventually captures the attention of the decision makers in the organization. They move to an enterprise plan. So that's happened a lot here, where we've had thousands and thousands of companies from Nike to Adidas to some of the most iconic brands on the earth, Google, Apple. They've all used our
Yeah.
platform at one point or another. And we've built in sales motion that obviously captured those things, right? So if a customer signs up for a lower plan, we have sales motion that looks like their domain and their email address to
Uh,
know, oh, these are a better fit for enterprise. And what's great about that is it's all marketing at the end of the day. And you can
hmm.
kind of think of that as trials where you're still getting paid for all of that stuff
Yeah.
because people are coming in on lower plans. So that's been working quite well. I would say we get a majority of our business just through customers that come in on lower plans and we are upgrading them as they want more team member functionality and all
Yeah.
those things. The things that we're running a lot of tests on right now is much more of that AI driven outreach. I'm finally to the point now as well, Jason, where I just don't have enough bandwidth to kind of do
Yeah.
marketing, customer success, and all the other things. We're hiring our first dedicated marketing resource, to be honest now, even though we're um, a couple of years in and doing pretty well from an ARR standpoint.
Well, that's good. I mean, yeah, you don't have the time. You got to hire a lot of ways, in a lot of instances. Well, great. If someone's listening and trying to scale right now, what's one piece of advice you wish you had earlier?
If somebody was listening and trying to scale right now, piece of advice. Again, I just kind of go back to, I mean, it's been said before, but I think sometimes, and I have it because I'm a perfectionist, I kind of fall into this trap a little bit of the getting into sort of decision fatigue where you try to make something perfect and you really don't need to. And early on, you shouldn't waste as much time making something a perfect process because chances are in an early stage
It's
venture,
going
it's
to
going to change.
change.
It's going to change a lot.
Yeah.
And so just get something good enough that serves you well and then move on to your next thing because that'll help you just move faster. You're going to change it later, more than likely, or you're going to hire somebody that's going to want to change it or make it better. And so that's sometimes the trap that people fall into is trying to scale or build out processes um, too fast when they don't really need to at certain points in
Yeah.
their evolution of a company. That's probably, I would say that's advice that I've seen both in myself that I've kind of struggled with in earlier ventures and then also other people too.
Analysis paralysis and progress over perfection.
Yes, for sure.
Awesome. So, where can people connect with you, learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so if you're interested in RunDiffusion, our AI platform for accelerating sort of human imagination and creativity, RunDiffusion.com is a great place to find us. I have a lot of expertise in obviously the visual media generation space, but also just the AI and SaaS space in general. You can always connect with me, Blake Gibbons. I'm on LinkedIn. You can see me there, or you can email me, Blake@RunDiffusion.com as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Pleasure.